Hi, this is Robert Taylor. Today I'm reviewing the Mola Mola Tambaqui. One of the first things to impress me about the Tambaqui is its packaging. Mola Mola provides this hard plastic case, kind of like a pelican case, with foam cutout inserts to hold the Tambaqui in place. This is some of the best packaging I've ever seen from a high-end company. I'd be surprised if any Tambaqui was ever damaged in shipping with this type of packaging. The Mola Mola Tambaqui is 7.87 inches wide, 4.33 inches high, and 12.6 inches deep. It weighs approximately 11.46 pounds, and because of its size, it's easy to place in a crowded equipment rack. The Tambaqui, like all other Mola Mola products, have this undulating shape on its top panel, which sort of mimics a sine wave. I personally like the look. It's nice to see something different from the standard rectangular silver or black box that's the norm. The price of the Tambaqui is $13,500. And by the way, both Mola Mola and Tambaqui are both species of fish. The Tambaqui has two circuit boards. On the first board, all incoming digital audio is upsampled to a 3.125 megahertz frequency at 32 bits and is converted to a noise-shaped PWM, which stands for Pulse Width Modulation. The other board has two mono DACs for output. There is a deeper technical explanation on the Mola Mola website. The Tambaqui comes with a remote control, which I did not use. Instead, I used the Mola Mola app. The app works on iPhone or Android, and the app also works on many other Mola Mola products as well. This app is for control and setup only. You cannot select music to stream to the Tambaqui using this app. I did all my listening to the Tambaqui using Room connected via its Ethernet port. I also tried using Room with a separate streamer using USB, but I found I preferred the sound using the more direct Ethernet connection. With the streamer, the sound was a bit harder and not as airy. These were very minor differences. All the music that I own is stored as files on a NAS in my basement, and I also use Tidal and Qobuz streaming services. I listen to a wide variety of music in various sampling rates, from MP3s in my old iTunes library all the way up to DSD 256 files. I listen to FLAC, WAVE, MP3, MP4, DSD, DSF, and just about anything else you can think of. Every file at every sampling rate played perfectly with no issues at all. Because of its small footprint, the rear panel of the Tambaqui is a little crowded. The designers have omitted single-ended RCA outputs. There are only a set of balanced outputs. If you need to run the Tambaqui using RCA cables, they do provide a pair of XLR to RCA adapters for that purpose. For those who want the Cliff Notes version of this review, I find the Tambaqui the most musically engaging, non-fatiguing DACs I've ever heard, and I think it's well worth the price of admission.
Just a brief interruption, esteemed viewers. As you may know, I'm Tom Martin, Chief Content Officer of The Absolute Sound. We have a new product. It's on the Substack platform, and we're going to do some interesting things with Substack. First of which is reader questions and answers. Each Monday, readers will submit questions. We'll pick the most interesting ones and we'll answer the questions on Friday. We'll also have early access to articles and special blogs that don't appear anywhere else. We hope you'll join us. It's only a cost of a cup of coffee per month. Just check on the screen or in the show notes below. Thanks, and now back to the show.
Now some general observations about the sound. The Tambaqui is probably the most non-fatiguing DAC I've ever had in my system. I spent a number of 4-hour listening sessions with the Tambaqui and my body gave up before my ears did. There were a couple of occasions when I looked at the time and realized I'd been sitting there for hours and remembered that I had other work I needed to get done. And when I say I sat and listened to music for hours, I mean I sat and listened to music for hours. I didn't have music on in the background while I was doing other things. I just sat and listened. The highest compliment I can pay to the Tambaqui, I have to say, is it's the most analog-like DAC I've ever heard. There is a naturalness to the sound that is special to this DAC. The Tambaqui checks all the boxes as far as frequency response goes. It can plumb the deepest of depths and goes to the highest of highs. Where I think this DAC really excels is the ability to portray fine detail in the music without sounding hard or etched, and without the slightest hint of sounding bright, harsh, or fatiguing. There is a richness to the sound that I would call relaxing. The portrayal of space with the Tambaqui is first rate. The soundstage is wide and deep and very layered. You can hear the slightest of cues in this presentation. I listened to the Hollycoat Trio's first album, Girls Talk. This was recorded live to 2-track with a single microphone to mimic a live performance in a club. The song, My Baby Just Cares For Me, you can hear Hollycoat's voice in the center left of the soundstage, while David Pilch's bass is in the far right of the soundstage. You can hear the interplay between those two, especially in the middle of the song. There's a bass solo where you can hear David Pilch singing and humming along to the music. Toward the end of the song, the volume level for both the bass and Hollycoat's vocals start to increase. You start hearing more and more reverberation off the walls of the studio. On the album CSN by Crosby, Stills and Nash, the song Just the Song Before I Go, you can distinctly hear the tonal richness of their combined harmonies, but at the same time you can distinctly hear all three individual voices in their own individual spaces. The singers sound like they're standing 3 abreast in the same lateral plane, while the backing musical track is behind the singers. While the Tambaqui sounds great and all, it's not a miracle worker. It can't fix bad sounding recordings. I took a listen to the album So Intense by Lisa Fischer. This album was recorded in 1991 and it's probably the brightest CD I've ever heard. It's hard, brittle, and glassy sounding. I don't know why the recording engineer felt the need to add all this electronic processing to Lisa Fischer's voice. She sounds incredible as a singer, but somebody felt the need to mess up her sound. I love the music on this album, but I hate the sound of it. But I found that you listening through it to the Tambaqui makes it more listenable than it has been in the past with lesser DACs. Jazz vocalist Liz Wright has a new album out called Shadow. I've been a big fan of hers since her first album, and I always considered her underrated. This album is a mix of covers and songs written by Liz herself. Even though she is characterized as a jazz singer, this album has some R&B, some world music, a bit of folk. It's kind of all over the map, but the music is great and it is well recorded. The opening track, Shadow, is a standout. She does a duet with Angelique Kiddo, which you can really hear the contrast in their voices. Since I've been listening to Crosby, Stills and Nash of late, I found a cover version of their song Long Time Gone. This is done by an artist named Ruthie Foster, and this is from her album Let It Burn. The song features the Blind Boys of Alabama singing the chorus and backup. This song is a mashup of gospel, blues, and funk. The bass and the drums give you this driving rhythmic foundation. The song has the power of a gospel choir and the funkiness of a group like Parliament Funkadelic. Also, it features the kind of blues sound of John Lee Hooker. If you like any of these types of music, I suggest you take a listen to this song. The Tambaqui can also rock out. I listened to Hanging on the Telephone from Blondie off of their album Parallel Lines, and you can hear the sheer wall of sound that this record is. The song can sound a bit harsh and bright, but it still has that characteristic. But on the Tambaqui, it's a little more listenable, especially at higher volume levels. I took a listen to the SACD of Autograph by Chantel Chamberlain. This album came out in 2016. I listen to this album periodically and then I forget I have it, and then I remember how great this album sounds. This is a really natural sounding album that does her voice really well. The standouts on this album are Fever and Besame Mucho. On Besame Mucho, she sings a big part of this in French, which is a very different take on the song. All the instruments are clearly defined in a precise manner within the soundstage. It's a very natural sounding album, as I've said before. The song selections and arrangements really complement Chantal Chamberlain's smoky voice. Jazz pianist Sullivan Fortner has an album out called Solo Game, which, as the name suggests, is an album of solo piano. One of the things I like about this album is you can truly hear the mechanics of the piano. You hear the keys, you hear the fretboard, you hear the pedals being pressed like you would being in front of a real piano. This album has a wide variety of songs in various tempos, and Sullivan Fortner is a highly skilled musician. I've never really heard of him until last year, but I'm truly impressed by what he can do, and he's a fairly young musician still. On this album, you can really hear the full range of the piano along with its dynamic capabilities. The one thing I will say though is I think it portrays the piano a little too wide in the soundstage, but other than that, this is a fantastic sounding record. Highly recommend it. The Tambaqui is not an inexpensive product, but I think it's a great value in the world of high-end DACs. I think it can compete with DACs far more expensive. It sounds fantastic. It makes you want to sit and listen to music for hours. I've had no issues with the operation of the unit, and I think it's a nice looking product as well.